I'd like to convene this meeting of the Committee of the Whole. Tonight's agenda is the discussion and review of the proposed new ward and precinct lines for this city. This evening, we have all councilors present. We do have two councilors participating remotely, Councilor Saslar and Councilor Turco, and for that reason, we will take roll call on all motions. And before we start with the agenda, I was just hoping we could accept the late communications as one, which are the Peabody legal boundary descriptions for the wards and the revised Peabody legal boundary descriptions for precincts. Those are on your desks tonight.
So moved.
You've heard the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould. Manning Martin.
Yes.
Sasla.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
Charis. McGinn.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to ask Michael Owens, who's appearing by Zoom. He's the Re-Precincting Community Engagement Director from the Office of the Secretary of the Commonwealth, and he's going to give us a brief summary of the process for the next steps to be taken. Mr. Owens?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, everybody, for having me. If there's any issues with audio, just let me know. I had to move locations because the computer I was using a few moments ago wasn't working. So I have the headphones in and we're doing what we can here. But anyways, thank you for having me. It's the re-precincting process, as you're all aware, is a result of the completion of the census. Every 10 years when the census is complete, the US Census that is, cities and towns in Massachusetts are required to redraw their voting precincts. And that happens at the municipal level. And our office does assist kind of as much or as little as the city would like. And we assist by way of technical assistance. Input is taken from the city, and then we adjust and revise the maps accordingly. And the way our office suggests the kind of best practice that we suggest is forming a working group at the city level through your city clerk's office, which Peabody has done. I did meet with, we did a webinar with the city, and I also did come up and speak with Clerk Danforth as well as Mr. Spanos. And kind of went through and showed how we create maps, and we took a look at the Peabody city map. So Peabody did experience some good growth. You had, I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but I know it was upwards of about 3,000, I believe, over the previous census. And I mean, that's good news for the city. I think that's a good sign that, you know, you guys are doing good things there in Peabody, because it's obviously a place that people want to be. That's reflected in the strong growth that Peabody experienced. So with growth, of course, you are going to have some shifts in boundary lines. I don't think there were tremendous shifts. And kind of the approach that we take when we provide technical assistance on the maps is we try to minimize the shifts in the boundary lines. You know, for a number of reasons. And that's what we've done with this map, tried to, and I know that's what the working group, at the direction of the working group, has done also, tried to minimize shifts, even despite the significant growth that Peabody experienced over the last 10 years. So Peabody does come in now, I believe it's 54,481 residents. You're remaining with the 6 wards, 3 precincts, and the process would be here. I mean, it's been a lot of work by the working group and the members in the city to get to this point. And unfortunately, this year, because of COVID, there was a shortened timeline. So we were expecting the data in June. The data did not come out. That's the census data I'm referring to. Official census data did not come out until mid-August. So there was originally this deadline of October 30th, and you can just imagine the amount of work that it's taken in that 4 to 5 week turnaround to get a map put together and to to get us to this point. So where we are at this point, if it's the will of the council to approve the map, the map would, all of those materials would then be submitted to the LEDRC, which is the Local Elections District Review Commission. The Secretary of the Commonwealth, William Galvin, is the chair of that commission. There is also an appointee from the Attorney General's office, Beth Wong, as well as an appointee from the Governor's office, Brad Jones, Representative Brad Jones, minority leader. So it's a 3-member commission, and they would look to see that the map is a conforming map. And by conforming, we mean that no precinct can be over 4,000 people. And that you are within a 5% variance of your average precinct size. So what that means is we take the population of Peabody, which is the 54,000 number, you divide that by however many precincts you have, and that will produce an average precinct size. You cannot be 5% up or down from that average precinct size. So those are the real significant parameters in terms of the data and where you have to fall. Additionally, of course, it's important that minority vote dilution doesn't occur. And that is something that really takes the knowledge of your city. And that's why we recommend having the working group and having individuals from the city kind of having that input to know your neighborhoods. We believe you know your neighborhoods best and where particular communities of interest or minorities may be. And through the process that you've undergone, we're confident that you've taken a look at all of those things. And from our standpoint, from what we can see, this would be you have been able to come up with a map that does preserve all of those things and that is conforming to the parameters of the 4,000 precinct size, as well as the 5% variance for each precinct. So in the eyes of the LEDRC, I don't want to speak for them, but I don't see a reason why this map would not be approved by the LEDRC. So from my standpoint and from this office standpoint, Peabody is in good shape in terms of your map.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. And before councilors may have some questions, I did want to just take a moment and recognize and thank the members of the working group, which was put together and did a lot of work on this project from the original map that was drawn up by the state based on estimates of the 2020 census. But I want to thank City Clerk Allison Danforth, who headed up the working group, Tim Spanos, Don Kahn, our city solicitor, Board of Registrars Judy Blodgett, Audrey Gordon, Will Politz, our city engineer, and also thank Priya Sankalia, who was the Geographic Information System GIS analyst. So thank you all for your work on this important project. We do have City Solicitor Don Kahn, who is here this evening to answer questions, but this time I'd like to open up to any councilors if they have any questions or comments at this time. Council Melville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank the working group for everything the time and effort that was put into this. Anything that you do every 10 years is not typical, so there's a fact of research and then executing on that research. And I know the timeline was much different than in previous redistricting plans, and I know in some cases throughout the country, redistricting can become a political matter, and I think this was done with the utmost professionalism, and I just want to congratulate all of you on doing that. So I don't have any questions on the map. I think that the summaries and the maps were very self-explanatory, but also I think even to the public and reading them, they'd understand them. And when the time comes, I know my fellow councilors could have some questions and comments, but I'd be happy to make a motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Melville. Councilor Shrestha?
Thank you. Again, I want to acknowledge, like my fellow councilor, and I'm sure everyone else will, for the hard work that this committee put into it. I know each and every one of them, or most every one of them, and I have total respect for their hard work they put into it. And in a short period of time. So one of my questions was, maybe through you, President, to the official from the state, is if it was normally given to us in June, and not until October, and the timeline was shortened because of COVID. Why wasn't it not extended for the city and towns to be able to work on it on a more timely, well, because they had to crunch so quickly? Is there any reason why we weren't?
Yep, Mr. President, I can answer that if you'd like.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Owens.
Yep, so I apologize, I misspoke when we said we should have gotten the data in June. June was the original deadline. We should have gotten the data in February. So the U.S. Census Bureau had delayed the release of that data. So it was supposed to come in February. The original deadline was in June. Because of COVID, that deadline that's a statutory deadline in Massachusetts. Our office did file legislation to change that deadline. We did at that time in June is when it was changed, and we weren't aware when we would get that data from the Census Bureau. They were not providing any state, including Massachusetts, any information as to when they would release that data. So not knowing when we would receive that data, we set the deadline for the new statutory deadline for October 30th. The data ended up coming out August, and there wasn't another change to that deadline. The state legislature also did file legislation which does extend the deadline if needed for a city or town, and that's really for the purpose for the legislature to do their redistricting. But in terms of another legislative change to change the deadline from October to some other date, that didn't happen. It did happen once from June to October. So it was changed, but it unfortunately still created a situation that created a short turnaround.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple more, if you don't mind, Mr. President. And I appreciate that explanation on that. Now, my ward is affected by this, and I do know that everyone who worked on this worked their butts off and were so transparent by it. But as a ward counselor, to me, it's almost asking me to give up one of my children. Which one you pick? Because I'm losing. So it's hard that way as a ward counselor saying, okay, I can okay losing, these streets and these neighborhoods. And again, as I experienced it over the years, I've had that. I've had one side of the street, one ward, the other side, a different ward, throughout neighborhoods. And it's hard because these neighbors talk with each other. They feel part of the neighborhood. And then when you explain to them the different wards, different counselors as ward counselors, it's hard. And I do think it affects the voting because people are not really sure where they are. I still have people 10 years who are in ward, outside my ward that was Ward 4 before, think they're still in Ward 4, and you have to explain it to them. And we work as ward counselors, we work very hard to make sure we get our streets and sidewalks repaved and fixed and a balance throughout our wards. And we tried to do that because we only have so much. And when things like this happen, it's hard. I feel it's hard on our wards to saying, okay, now a whole process that we looked at for 2 years to make sure one street is paved in this neighborhood, one street's paved in this neighborhood, that gets taken away. And again, there's no fault of anyone here listening. I get it. But as a ward counselor, again, I feel it's like you're asking me to vote for which child I'm going to give up. And I do feel that all my constituents and residents here is part of my family. And so whichever way I go, I want to make sure it's clear. It has no reflect on the work that was done here. I think it was so much work on them. I know they did everything they needed to do by the book. Right? I just don't like the way the book was written. And again, no disrespect to anybody else here. If this, and through the President, if this map isn't approved, tonight, what happens?
Mr. Owens, did you hear the question?
Yep, I can answer if you like, Mr. President.
Thank you. Please.
So, Counselor, I completely understand your concerns. You know, I myself, I may not look like it, but a number of years ago, I had the privilege of serving as a counselor in Braintree for a couple terms. And so I understand, you know, and I myself was a district counselor there, a ward counselor. So I represented a part of the city, and you know, I know how much work you as elected officials, local elected officials, I know how much you put in for your community. I know the time and the relationships you build, and you know, you guys are really where the rubber meets the road. I mean, you're out there making sure the trash is picked up, potholes are filled. So I understand the work that goes in, and I do know how important those relationships are, and also for the residents. I mean, like you said, there is an element of confusion that happens out there, and when you shift districts and wards, that just adds to the confusion for voters, and that's something that you know, we try to minimize. So I completely understand your concerns. In terms of, or let me just back up just one moment. The way the maps are created, a map is made up of what's called a census block, and a census block is the smallest geographic area created by the Census Bureau. So the Census Bureau creates these census blocks. They're all unique in size and shape, and the reason for that is because they have to be, they're geographic areas that have to be bound by natural features such as roadways, power lines. You know, they can't cut a house in half. They have to be normal boundaries. So the Census Bureau creates all these census blocks, and they're all unique in size and shape. And all those census blocks together are what make up a city's map. I say that because you could have a census block that is a massive area of land, but it only has 5 or 6 people in it. And if you were to move that census block, or to, you know, to shift it into a different precinct, that's going to have a domino effect throughout the map. So when you start to move census blocks, that's going to have a ripple effect somewhere else in the map, you know, because that land has to end up somewhere, basically. So that's the problem you get into when you start to make shifts. So you are naturally, when you have growth the size that Peabody did, you're naturally going to have to make those shifts. And I think you stated it very clearly yourself. You understand that, and you understand, you know, that process. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast. You know, there are going to be shifts, and sometimes some shifts are greater than others, and you try to do your best when moving those census blocks. But I do understand how that translates in real life. I mean, people are affected. There is, you know, change in precincts. There's voter confusion. Those things can occur. So, point well taken. In terms of if the council were to vote down the map, that's completely at the will of the council, of course. In terms of timeline, there is a target date of October 30th. I mentioned earlier that the legislature did change the timeline for state redistricting, and that does somewhat affect the municipal deadline. So through that legislation, you do have technically up until 30 days after redistricting is complete. Redistricting should be complete. That's the state redistricting, state legislature redistricting, should be complete November 15th. So that would bring you to a date of December 15th, that in a worst case, if you needed to, you have up until December 15th to submit a conforming map to the LEDRC. If you were to miss that deadline, the state, the Secretary's office, the LEDRC would appoint a master for the city. The master's role would be to draw a map for the city, but essentially the city would lose all control at that point, and the master would draw the map however they see fit. And then, unfortunately, the city would have to pay for the services of the master. But that only happens if you miss the deadline. So I think you're quite a ways from that. So in other words, if you were to vote down the map tonight, what would happen is it would go back to the working group. for revisions or changes. They would submit those revisions and changes to us, and we would produce a new map for you, and it would go through this process again. It would go, we would make those changes, send it back to the working group, and the working group would send it back to the council, and the council can vote up or down. If that process were to obviously continue up until you get into the ballpark of December, you then run into the risk of missing that deadline and having a master appointed. But that would be the process essentially. So the council can adopt it, or any councilor that is opposed to it, of course, could always vote against the map. But if the council as a whole were to reject the map, it would go back to your working group, come back to us for revisions, and then it would come back to the council. And as long as all of those logistics can occur before that December timeframe, then you'll be okay and avoid master appointment. If that goes beyond that December deadline, that's when you run into the master appointment. So hopefully that answers the question. I know it was a little long-winded, but.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Does that answer your question, Councilor
Yeah,
Shrest?
if I would, Mr. Owens, excellent. Yeah, you really covered everything, and the last thing I really want to do is put more work onto the working group, because I know they worked really, really hard. And I would say, I think you're wrong in one area. Not only do you look like a city councilor, you look like a mayor. So maybe you have a future somewhere that you do look like a candidate for a mayor somewhere. But
Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, is no reflection on the hard work. Because again, this is now, if the board rejects it, it's saying, okay, now your working group, go back. The rules don't change. They still have to follow the same rules, the same guidelines, right? They just have to try to undo the puzzle and put the puzzle back again. And maybe one of my other councilors, ward councilors, will be affected, and they're gonna love me, right? So.
Exactly. You hit the nail right on the head.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Owens.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councilor Shrest. I believe I saw Councilor Saslaw's hand up. Councilor Saslaw, did you want to ask a question or speak?
I would, thank you. So I just had a question regarding, we have 3 maps, and I just don't want to assume anything, so could maybe whoever's on the working committee just take us through the 3 maps and what they represent, and then I might have some specific questions afterwards, but I didn't want to assume what each map did, and I think there's one that's titled at the top right-hand corner, City of Peabody. Then the next map we get is City of Peabody Precincting 2021. And the third map was City of Peabody, said just re-precincting. So maybe if we can just explain the maps, I'd appreciate it. It would help me out.
Can I steal your copies of your maps, Councilor Gold?
And by the way, I would also like to echo thank you to the working committee. I know this is not an easy job by any means. Thank goodness it only happens every 10 years.
Would you like me to jump in here, Allison, President?
I guess what I'm trying to understand is.
Priya, would you like to would you like to answer Councilor Saslaw's question, please?
Yes, I can. Would you like me to share my screen, or you have them in front of you so I can just describe them to you? Would that help?
Sure, if you could share the screen, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, are you able to see my screen and the maps? This is the packet that was sent to everybody. So this is basically the map which was created by the Secretary of State, Mr. Owens' department, and sent to the city. And we have, so this is what the final map looks like, and that's what you see all the new the wards and the precincts, and you get all the information about the target population for each precinct, the 5% that Mr. Owens is talking about, minimum, maximum, and the variance. So this table describes all of that to you. So this was the map that came from the state. The other 2 maps that we provided you are just for additional information, highlighting what were the wards that actually changed. So, which are the, where the ward changes. So you can see the hashing is showing you the areas that actually changed wards. The areas, the blocks that changed wards, and that's what we were trying to highlight in this one. So that's primarily what's happening in this map. And then there is some additional demographic information broken down here for everybody's reference. And finally, the third map, and I apologize, we should have put a subheading on it, but it is to give you a sense of where the environmental justice block groups are. And this is, again, just some background information to tell you where those, which blocks are designated as minority environmental justice block groups for minority income, English isolation, so all these different categories that are coming out of, again, data from the state and the census. So those are the three maps that were given as, these two were mostly for reference, and the first map is essentially the actual final map, or the map that's up for vote.
Thank you.
Councilor Sasslaw, were you able to hear, and I know the maps are difficult to read, but were you able to, did that answer your question?
That question was answered. I have a few more if I could, please.
Sure, go ahead.
So I totally understand it. My question was that on the map, so the map that shows where we're going to go forward with the new boundaries, on that map, I noticed it did not have voting locations. On the second map, it did. And my question was, is I noticed that, and this has come up recently because of the COVID voting environment, I've noticed that, you know, a couple of locations, actually, no, I apologize. I do see the Cowley School there on Taylor Street. It was blocked by the name of the road. I do see half a star there. I was just curious about where the locations for voting were, and I do see that's there. Just specifically, because the public might be looking, and I just would like to ask publicly. So it looks like Huntington Woods would go towards 6, and for people who are local, it looks like the neighborhood, we'll say next to the high school, will be leaving 4 and going to Ward 5. Is that correct in my assumption, looking at the maps? So people out there understand as well?
That's
Maybe
correct.
someone local? Okay. And I guess the only comment I have, and I echo some of the sentiments that Councilor Charest said, one of the things that has been difficult, and I will be supporting this, but I just want to bring it up in case anybody is on this committee next time we go around. The one thorn that has been kind of difficult is the condominiums, and I'll be specific with Ledgewood and Bourbon Street. Actually, Ledgewood, I believe, is all-inclusive. Bourbon Street is separated, so sometimes that is kind of difficult. So I understand, I believe it's staying the same. So half of Bourbon Street is on one ward, half is on the other ward. But I think those are things that kind of frustrate the public at large. But I understand, I appreciate what you folks did. And unless I hear something really earth-shattering, I do plan on supporting what was happening and what you folks, the work that you did. And thank you very much again.
Thank you, Councilor Sasslaw. Councilor Rosendahl had his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. First of all, I just want to thank the committee for providing us with these maps. They were very easy to read, and as a couple of councilors mentioned, it looks like there's 3 general neighborhoods that are going to be affected with this change. Thank you for doing your due diligence and providing us with this. The only question I have is, how are we going to disseminate that information when the time comes? How will the voters and the people and the residents that live in these areas be notified that their precincts and their wards are changing? Is there a game plan to at least make sure that that is kind of known to the residents?
Great question, Councilor Rosendahl. And we should clarify that this would not be in effect until this, if it is approved, until December 31st, so after these elections. But Attorney Allison suggested that we flip it over to Tim Spanos to actually answer that, because you handled this 10 years ago, I guess, Mr. Spanos.
Can you all hear me? Okay, so what will happen is we will get a list of the changes, the actual addresses, and those voters will be notified of their ward or precinct change. So they will all be notified. I don't know when we'll get that specific data. And I don't know if Michael has anything further to add on that, but from my recollection, 10 years ago, that's what we did.
Mr. Owens, would you like to comment?
Sure, Mr. President. So our office, when all of this is complete, when I say all of this, I mean for all 351 cities and towns, when the LEDRC has adopted all of the maps, at that point, our office would then go through the process of providing a list to each city of any voters that would be affected. So you will be getting a list from our office of those residents so that the city can provide proper notification to them. However, that list doesn't come until the end of the process. So we're probably going to be sometime in December, hopefully early December. Unfortunately, it's the way the software works. It won't allow us to start to build out those lists until we get through this stage. So it's really a software and logistical thing more than anything else. But come at the end of this process, you will be provided all of that information for notification.
Thank you very much. Councilor Rosenau?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to echo and emphasize a statement you had made earlier, and that is that this does not affect this coming election, which voting is happening now and will be happening up until Tuesday. This is for future elections, so any discussion that we're having, I just want to make sure everybody is well aware that that does not include this current election cycle. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Rosenau. Councilor Gould, and then Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to everyone involved, and I'll be real brief. Precinct 43A, which is Brooksby Village, is that not listed because that's a fixed number and never changes? The population stays consistent? I don't know who to, maybe Dawn or Judy?
Actually, that's the only aspect of this that's going to take some additional work. We're going to have to work with the state going forward to make sure the sub-precinct is able to be continued to be utilized. So that's not specifically a part of this process, but it's something that we're aware of and we'll be working on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gould. Councilor Walton?
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for the extended clarification on this, but based on Councilor Rosignol's most recent statement, I just want to make sure that everyone's all on the same page here. So these effects, the changes will go into effect in the new year. Your ward representation will stay the same through the entire 2 years, and then the next election cycle will take place based on the new precinct. So for instance, come 2022, we're going to have people that are affected on Princeton Street. So who are they going to go to for their ward representation in March of 2022? That's not going to change until the following election, correct?
That will take effect next election, next year,
Okay, great.
in the
So
state
just to-
primary.
Got it. So
Correct.
just to clarify and to emphasize what Councilor Rossignol had said, when our constituents go to the election booths in 9 days, they're voting for the representative for the full term, not for part of the term, and then this is going to take place.
Right.
Yep, okay, thank you. It just sounded a little tricky when you explained it, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor Walton. Good point and clarification. Any other councils have? Councilor Mitsoulas?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to touch on a couple of comments that Councilor Charest made. You know, you get attached to your neighborhood. You get attached to your ward. I'll give you an example of what happened to me this year. I've been working along with Tom Gould, the councilor at large, trying to get certain roads hot top. We finally did. We got Loris Road, Reynolds Road, Tammany, and Northfield. And the people in that neighborhood, I went down to visit them while they were ripping up the hot top, and they got the word that they were going to not be in Ward 3 any longer. They were going to another ward. And I seen an earlier map that kind of said that, but that wasn't the final product. So I said to him, I don't know. I said, we're going to have a meeting on it, and we'll make a decision on it. But they were disappointed that they were not going to be Ward 3 any longer. Now, if I go back when I first got on the council 30 years ago, I hate to keep talking like that, but anyways, Chandler's was part of my ward. Buttonwood Lane was part of my ward. You know, we switched it all around. But the truth and the bottom line is, you know, this is a job you have to do, and we will work it out. You know, the people that I lost, Buttonwood Lane area, they got a good council, they got a trust. And the people on Tammany and Loris Road, they were Ward 4. Now they're in my ward. They don't want me to leave. I mean, it works itself out. You people have a very responsible job, and you don't play favorites. You do what you're supposed to do, and that's the right thing. And I like the fact that everybody on this council is not complaining. They're saying, well, we don't like it, but you know what? If that has to be, it's going to be. And the bottom line is, it will work itself out. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. You know, I've experienced it, and you'll probably be happy with the new people that you get to meet. You know, so with that, listen, I just want to say, Allison, you and your committee did a great job. You know, you deserve a lot of credit, and the people who volunteered their time, this council thanks you, as I do too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Mitsoulas. Any other councilors want to comment at this time? At this time, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. So when we actually have to vote, we're voting on just this one map, right? The other two are just reference documents,
Yes.
is that? So this, the top map that we're voting on doesn't make any specific reference to voting locations, so that the voting locations that are on the other two are for reference purposes only, correct?
That's correct, Counselor.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the only point of clarification. I add my thanks to all the other councilors for all the hard work the committee did. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Any other councilors? At this time, I'd ask Councilor Melville to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make a motion, be it ordered by the City Council of the City of Peabody that at a meeting held on October 25th, 2021, the Peabody City Council voted to accept as presented by the clerk version 1 of the 2021 re-precincting plan for the City of Peabody to be effective as of December 31st, 2021. So moved.
Councilors, you've heard the motion.
On that motion?
On the motion, Councilor Stress?
I know it takes effect, but it physically doesn't take an effect until the 2 years, until the next municipality election. So in January, excuse me, my understanding is those neighborhoods that will be moved over still stays in their home, because people are voting this November on their counselor, their ward counselor. If it changes, then their vote is null and void. So that's what I'm saying. I think we're not understanding, it goes two different ways here. If it takes an effect, the map may be taking effect, but the district doesn't change the ward council wards until the municipality election of 2 years from this November. Want to make sure we're clear. We said it two different ways now.
Just, I'm going to ask Mr. Owens if he would like to comment on that and just the process, but once again, to clarify, this has no effect on the upcoming election. It is after that. Mr. Owens, would you like to answer? Could you hear Councilor Charest's question about
Yes.
when this, if this map is approved or when it becomes effective?
Correct. Through the president, if I may, the lines would go, what you would be voting on tonight is for it to take effect per the statute, which would be, obviously it wouldn't be effective today, it would be effective per that statute date of December 31st, 2021. So these are voting precincts. So they would come into effect when there is an election within that calendar year, or until the lines were changed until the next, census. So in other words, you vote, the people that are, when residents vote this November, they are voting for the current representation that they have. That will remain their representation until an election to change representation, which would happen in 2 years from now. However, the reason it does statutorily take effect at that December date. So in other words, if there were, for example, a special election for a particular reason next year in an off calendar year, then you would be using the updated lines. So the representation remains the same, but because it's for voting purposes, if there were to be an election for any particular reason from that date leading up to your next election, then the new lines would take effect. So it's because it's for voting purposes, it goes into effect when an election is triggered after that statutory date.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. On the motion, does that answer your question, Councilor Charest?
It does. I just want to make sure we have that message out there clear. And I figured Tim has a big paragraph he's going to have to write, or Allison's going to have to write up to just make sure the voters understand. I just don't want people to be misinformed. Thank you.
On the motion, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Sasslaw.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
Charist.
Present.
McGinn.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0, one voting present.
Thank you all. This concludes the agenda items of the Committee of the Whole. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
Vote. You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Manning Martin. Sasslaw.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Rozignol.
yes.
Melville. O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
This meeting is now adjourned.
Mr. President, I just want to make sure, I think that, I'm not sure.
We're all set. We're just going to do the final vote on that, but thank you for your time.
Okay.
If any other attendees, other than city councilors, want to jump off, that's okay too. Thank you. I'd like to now call to order this special meeting of the Peabody City Council. Tonight's agenda is the report from the Committee of the Whole meeting that was held earlier this evening. The Committee of the Whole met tonight to review the final ward and precinct lines for our city that will be effective December 31st, 2021. In attendance at the meeting were all councilors. However, Councilor Sasslaw and Councilor Turco participated remotely, so that's why we had roll call votes at the last meeting. We heard a presentation from Michael Owens, who is from the Commonwealth, the Office of the Director of Re-Precincting. He gave us an overview of the process of going through the data from the 2020 federal census, where every 10 years it's required that various cities and towns of Massachusetts update or redraw their ward and precinct maps based on the most recent population data from that census. There were some serious challenges due to COVID in receiving the data from federal government. The statutory deadline was June, but was extended this year to allow for cities and towns to redraw their maps. The 2020 census data showed a new population for Peabody of 54,481. To clarify, the new map of precincts and wards, if approved by the state, would not be in effect until December 31st, 2021. Voters who are changing into new wards or precincts at a later election after December 31st, 2021 will be notified of the change in the near future. After local approval, the city clerk will submit maps, population information, and description of the boundaries of each ward and precinct to the Secretary of Massachusetts, who then send this information to the local election districts review commission. This evening we did, during the meeting, we did accept late communications, which were a Peabody legal boundary description of the revised wards, as well as the boundary descriptions of the revised precincts. Can I like to entertain a motion? You've heard the motion from Councilor Gould. At this time, any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Sasslaw.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
Charis.
Present.
McGinn.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0, one present.
During the Committee of the Whole, a motion was made to approve the current and final map. The vote was 10-0 with one present. I will now bring it forth for the consideration of the full council tonight. Be it ordered by the City Council of the City of Peabody that at a meeting held on October 25th, 2021, the Peabody City Council voted to accept, as presented by the City Clerk, version 1 of the 2021 re-precincting plan for the City of Peabody to be effective as of December 31st, 2021. So moved. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Manning Martin. Yes. Sasslaw.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
Charis.
Present.
McGinn.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0, one voting present.
Thank you. I just want to point of clarification. We're going to have everyone, they have to sign a document, so before you leave, please make sure you see Allison. At this time, I'll now accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
You've heard the motion. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould. Manning Martin. Sasslaw.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
Charis. McGinn.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Sorry.